Imagine police taking a DNA swab from a discarded coffee cup at a crime scene, and then a few days later, you find yourself placed under state surveillance.
Right, not because you committed a crime.
Exactly. Not because you were anywhere near the scene, but simply because your second cousin was. Your genetic material just made you a suspect by association.
It is a terrifying, incredibly complex frontier of modern governance, and we are standing right on the edge of it today.
Welcome to the Daily Deep Dive 3D initiative of UPSC with Saurabh Kaushik. We are so glad you are joining us. Our mission is to cut through the noise of the day's dense material without making you feel overwhelmed.
Because there is a lot of noise today.
There really is. So let's get right into the index for today, Monday, 22 June 2026. We are covering 24 topics serially. We've got international diplomacy with the U.S.-Iran talks and U.S.-EU trade deals. We are looking at environmental deadlocks in the Western Ghats, deep tech like ancient DNA, AI ethics, and biochar.
And we're also digging into governance of the PNSS, the NSDC, and the concept of constitutional fraternity.
Right, and finally, India's major milestones. Looking at the Space Odyssey and the Ashtalakshmi framework, it's a massive roadmap.
It is, but, even though we are jumping from ancient Indus Valley genetics to future-facing AI guardrails, there's a theme here. It's all connected by a nation rapidly redefining its global and domestic identity.
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. So let's jump into the first source, global energy security. It directly impacts your daily life, even if it feels far away. We are looking at the U.S.-Iran nuclear talks happening right now in Bergenstock, Switzerland.
Yes, Phase 2 of the Muscat Accord. And the delegation leaders are fascinating. You have U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance on one side and Iran's Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf on the other.
And Ghalibaf's presence is the big signal here, right?
It's massive. Because Ghalibaf isn't just a politician, he's an ex-IRGC commander.
The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Exactly. The IRGC is the hardline power center in Tehran. They're usually the most suspicious of the West. So having him physically there signals that the hardliners have given conditional approval to make a deal.
Wow, okay. But the clock is ticking. There's an August 13 deadline. What exactly has to happen by then?
Well, Iran has to cap enrichment at 3.67%, downblend over 440 kilograms of 60% uranium, and restore the IAEA additional protocol, so SNAP inspections.
Wait, 60%? That sounds dangerously close to weapons grade.
It is. Enrichment isn't linear. Getting to 20% is the hard part. Going from 60 to 90% weapons grade is a very fast sprint. That stockpile is a ticking time bomb for the West.
Okay, so if Iran dismantles the bomb, what's their payout?
About $180 billion in frozen assets, plus OFAC oil licenses.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because on one hand, you have J.D. Vance trying to make a delicate deal in Switzerland. On the other hand, Donald Trump is on Truth Social threatening to obliterate Iran. How does diplomacy survive that?
I mean, it looks chaotic, but it's actually a classic example of Putnam's two-level game theory.
The domestic versus international game.
Right. Level 1 is the international table where Vance is making pragmatic compromises. Level 2 is the domestic base. Trump's social media threats are posturing to keep his hardline voters happy, while the real deal happens quietly.
Do the Iranians see through that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, their media exploited Trump's posts to pause talks briefly, which made them look tough to their own hardliners. It's a dance.
So why should you, the listener, care about this dance? Because it dictates the price of everything. If there's a deal, oil stays around $85 to $90 a barrel. Economic recovery is locked in.
But if it collapses, oil could hit $115. That means fertilizer shortages and massive rupee pressure for India.
Right. Now, while the U.S. navigates Iran, they are also trying to lock in trade with India. USTR Jamieson Greer is in Delhi to finalize this Modi-Trump interim trade deal.
Yeah, targeting $500 billion by 2030, with an 18% effective Indian tariff ceiling.
But there are friction points, like the equalization levy. Is that basically a 2% digital toll booth that the U.S. absolutely hates?
That is the perfect analogy. It's a 2% tax on digital services by non-resident companies. The U.S. hates it so much, they paused Section 301 proceedings just to negotiate it.
So they paused the trade war threats. But what about agriculture? The U.S. wants huge tariff cuts on wheat and dairy.
Like 40% cuts. And that's a clash because India has to protect its domestic farmers. It's highly sensitive.
And from our side, we want H-1B mobility and protection for GI tags, right?
Yes, geographical indications. India wants to make sure premium products are protected in the U.S. market.
So we're negotiating global boundaries there. Let's pivot to domestic ecological boundaries. The Western Ghats ESA notification deadlock. This has been stuck for 12 years under the Environment Protection Act.
It has. You have two main committees that completely disagreed. The Gadgil Committee wanted 100% of the area declared an ecologically sensitive area across 3 tiers.
Which was ecologically sound but politically impossible.
Exactly. Then the Casterangan Committee came in and said, let's do 37%, roughly 60,000 square kilometers, in 2 tiers.
But even that got stalled. Gujarat, Goa, and Maharashtra are on board, but Kerala and Karnataka are resisting.
Because they have to protect local livelihoods. Mining, plantations people depend on that land.
But what finally acted as the catalyst for this 6th draft notification was an absolute tragedy. The Wayanad landslides in July 2024.
Over 230 deaths. It was horrific. And it forced the government's hand to prioritize ecology over immediate economic activities in those highly vulnerable zones.
It's a harsh reality check. Now moving from the Ghats to the oceans. PM Modi just simultaneously commissioned 3 naval vessels at Mazagon Dock. The INS Nilgiri, the Surat, and the Vakshar submarine.
This is a huge maritime growth signal, and it ties directly into the blue economy.
Right, because defense enables economics. The blue economy is currently about 4% of GDP, but they want it at 10% by 2030.
Yeah, and you can see that ambition in the Sagarmala program. Over 6 lakh crore rupees, 189 projects done. Port capacity is jumping from 1,400 to 3,300 MTPA.
MTPA being million tons per annum. And this all hooks into PM Gati Shakti and national waterways like NW1, right?
Exactly. It's an integrated logistics grid secured by this growing naval presence.
Which perfectly transitions us into our next segment. India is building outward maritime strength just as we target our largest economic partnership across the seas, the India-EU Trade Pact.
Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal just confirmed the December 2026 target for the CPA. This is our largest trade deal ever, worth 120 billion euros a year.
The wins here are huge. 124 EU service subsectors are opening up, which is massive for Indian IT, plus 250 GI tags protected, and the new investment court system.
But what's fascinating here is the CBAM negotiation.
The Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. It's basically a carbon tax at the border, right?
Yes. The EU wants to tax imports based on their carbon footprint. For India's steel and cement, that would be devastating. But India secured a transition period of more than 5 years before CBAM applies to us.
That's a huge diplomatic win, and it really contrasts with India staying out of the China-led RCEP. We are choosing high-value Western markets.
Precisely. We are defining our future trade identity.
Which is a great pivot to how we are defining our ancient genetic identity. Let's talk about the Rakhigarhi ADNA and facial reconstruction project.
Rakhigarhi is India's largest Indus Valley civilization site. Over 350 hectares, dating back to 3300 BCE. The ASI and Seoul National University are doing some incredible work there.
I was looking at the science behind this. They use CT scans, ancient DNA, and FACES software to literally reconstruct the faces of people who lived 5,000 years ago. It's mind-blowing.
It really is. But the genetic data itself, the ADNA, is even more important. It actually helps resolve the Aryan migration debate.
Right, and we have to look at this purely objectively. There was a 2019 Nature paper on this.
Yes, and the data showed that the IBC remains had minimal steppe ancestry.
Meaning they didn't come from the Eurasian steppe.
Right. It means the Indus Valley people descended primarily from South Asian hunter-gatherers and Iranian agriculturalists. The data resolves historical debates without taking any political sides, just archaeological fact.
And while ancient DNA solves the past, modern DNA is complicating the present. Let's look at the DNA Profiling Act 2022, or the CPIA.
The NCRB has generated over 1 lakh criminal DNA profiles under this act, which replaced the old 1920 Identification of Prisoners Act.
But the privacy pushback is intense. I mean, is DNA really just a high-tech fingerprint?
That's the argument some use, but it's flawed. A fingerprint just identifies you. DNA reveals your medical conditions, your ancestry, and your family connections.
Right, which brings up the familial DNA searches, where the state can find you just because a non-consenting relative is in the system.
Exactly. And that creates massive tension with Article 23 against self-incrimination, Article 21 regarding Puttaswamy privacy, and the DPDP Act of 2023.
It's a legal minefield, and we see similar ethical blurriness with big tech. Let's talk about Google Project Nimbus.
This is Google's $1.2 billion cloud contract with Israel's Ministry of Defense.
And there are massive protests over it. Even at IITs here in India, Google says it's just a normal commercial cloud.
But the protesters are pointing to dual-use technology. We just saw a precedent where xAI's Grok was used in Iran strike planning. Commercial cloud isn't separate from military AI anymore.
Reminds me of the 2018 Project Maven walkouts.
Very similar. And it ties right into what the UN group of governmental experts is trying to figure out regarding lethal autonomous weapon systems. Where is the line?
Well, speaking of lines, running all these AI data centers takes an insane amount of energy. So let's talk about energy security. India is making a huge nuclear push with NTTC.
The target is to scale from 7,480 megawatts to 100,000 megawatts of nuclear power by 2047. And NTPC is partnering with global giants like EDF, Westinghouse, and GE Hitachi.
I was reading about small modular reactors, or SMRs. Are those the game changers?
Absolutely. The BWRX 300 SMR, for example, has passive safety features. It cools itself down without active power, but there's a hurdle.
The Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act 2010.
Right. That act places liability on the suppliers, not just the operators. It has terrified Western companies and deterred them for 15 years.
Wow. But internally, we are still pushing our own tech, right? The 3-stage thorium fuel cycle.
Yes, and the prototype fast breeder reactor at Kalpakkam is a huge part of that. We are trying to become self-sufficient.
Which we also want to do with AI. Going back to AI, but from a Global South perspective, let's look at MAAV.
India presented the MAAV framework at the G7 in Evian. It's about AI guardrails for developing nations. Because there are 4 huge risks here.
Let's list them. First is job displacement. 30% of tasks could be automated by 2030. Second is cultural bias in the models. Third is data colonialism.
Where Western companies take our data for free and sell the AI back to us.
Exactly. And fourth is regulatory capture. So what's India's solution?
The MAAV framework and the India AI mission, which is backed by over 10,000 crore rupees. A great example of this is Pushini.
Oh, the 22-language translation tool.
Yes. It acts as a digital public good, so we don't have linguistic exclusion in tech. It's brilliant.
It really is. Now, shifting from digital tech to agricultural tech, we have a massive pollution issue every year in Delhi, stubble burning. But there's a new tech called biochar.
They call it black gold. Farmers usually burn about 35 million tons of paddy stubble, creating PM 2.5 crises. Biochar uses pyrolysis instead.
Pyrolysis. So that's heating the stubble between 400 and 700 degrees Celsius in the low oxygen, right? So it doesn't actually burn.
Correct. It turns into biochar, which is a massive multiplier.
Oh.
1 ton of biochar sequesters 2 to 3 tons of CO2, and ICAR trials show it increases wheat yields by 8 to 12%.
That's incredible. And farmers can actually make money off this through the carbon credit trading scheme, the CCTS.
Yeah, they can earn 15,000 to 20,000 rupees per hectare just for sequestering carbon.
That's a perfect bridge to broader agri-energy security. We're turning farm waste into fuel. 680 million tons of crop residue and cattle dung can make 18 million metric tons of compressed biogas.
CBG.
Mm-hmm.
The government is pushing this through PMQ, which solarizes farms to make farmers prosumers. They produce and consume energy.
Plus, the Gobardan scheme, using biogas and organic slurry instead of synthetic fertilizers, which protects us if the Hormuz crisis disrupts global fertilizer shipping.
It's a totally circular economy.
So government regulation is literally deciding what fuels our cars. But it also decides what fuels our bodies. We have a massive public health issue with junk food.
We really do. India has 77 million diabetics, and childhood obesity has doubled. The FSSAI is trying to regulate junk food ads.
HFSS foods, high fat, salt, and sugar. They want red front-of-pack warning labels. But the industry lobbying is fierce.
Public health experts use this concept of the information environment. Basically, advertising shapes a child's food choices the same way air pollution shapes their lungs.
That's a powerful analogy. And legally, you can connect this to Article 47 of the DPSP regarding the state's duty to improve public health.
Exactly, just like the COTPA laws did for tobacco.
Okay, keeping with public health and public infrastructure, there was a recent Supreme Court ruling on footpath rights.
Yes, and it's fascinating because it elevates the footpath from just concrete to a constitutional philosophy.
How so?
Footpaths are the physical manifestation of fraternity.
Yeah.
They're inclusive public spaces where a CEO and a daily wage worker have the exact same equal rights.
Wow, I never thought of it that way. Walkable cities build social cohesion. Speaking of civic order, let's transition to the legal system. The police reopening probes under the new BNSS.
There's so much political controversy over this, with the CBI and police reopening closed cases.
So what does this all mean legally? Because we have to remain totally impartial here.
Well, under Section 193A of the BNSS, You have to separate further investigation from weir investigation.
Okay, what's the difference?
Further investigation is legally valid when new evidence pops up. The police don't need prior court permission, and it ends in a supplementary charge sheet.
But a reinvestigation is starting from scratch.
Right, and that requires a specific court order. The controversy happens when political parties weaponize that further investigation clause after a closure report, or Form 34, was previously filed.
Got it. And the Supreme Court ruling in Vinupai Haripai Malavia clarified this, right?
Yes, exactly. The law is clear. It's the application that causes the friction.
Moving from domestic friction to global stagnation. Let's look at Britain, 10 years after the Brexit referendum, June 2016 to June 2026.
The numbers are stark. UK GDP growth crashed from 2.3% down to 0.8%.
And the irony is Brexit was largely driven by anti-immigration sentiment. But net migration actually hit a record 906,000.
Because they just replaced EU workers with non-EU workers to keep the economy running. It exposed massive divides between England and Scotland and North and South.
But it wasn't all bad for India. The UK's desperation to prove they could make trade deals fast-tracked the India-UK CETA, which takes effect July 15, 2026.
So we benefited from their institutional pivot.
Right. But we have our own institutional issues. Look at the NSDC and the PMKVY scheme. Skill Development Accountability.
The National Skill Development Corporation had to issue show-cause notices because of PMKVY lapses. 14,000 crore rupees spent, and CAG audits show only 15 to 20% placement rates.
That's a massive failure. What went wrong structurally?
The public-private partnership model was deeply flawed. Training partners inflated numbers, ran fictitious training centers, and there was a huge conflict of interest in how assessments were done.
They misused the RPL, the recognition of prior learning, just to print certificates without giving real skills.
Exactly. Contrast that with Germany's dual system, where training is backed by actual employers through apprenticeships. The PMKVY didn't link the training to real job demand.
A tough lesson in accountability, and when institutions fail, we have to look at our values. Let's talk about constitutional fraternity. The Indian Express had an amazing opinion piece on this.
It argued that fraternity is the most neglected value in the preamble, especially now with digital distrust and communal tensions.
Ambedkar actually warned about this in his Constituent Assembly speech, didn't he?
He did. He said, "Liberty and equality will fail without fraternity. It's the synthesis that holds society together."
And it's actually a fundamental duty under Article 51 AE.
Mm-hmm.
But today, social media algorithms are structurally hostile to it. They profit from outrage, not brotherhood.
It's a huge challenge for modern democracy.
It really is.
Yeah.
Now, looking at how democracy enforces its laws, ease of justice under the new criminal codes, the BNS and BNSS, we're assessing them after 2 years.
There are some clear technological wins: the zero FIR, the EFIR, mandatory video conferencing, and that strict 90-day charge sheet timeline.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's very victim-centric. Victims get 90-day progress updates, and BNS Section 4 introduced community service as a punishment.
Yes, a big step away from just jail time for minor offenses.
But we also have to note the controversy. The government called this decolonization, but critics point out things like BNS Section 152.
Right, which replaced the sedition law. Critics argue the new wording is just as broad, if not broader. The debate is still very much alive.
So we're building sustainable justice, but what about a sustainable planet? Topic 20 is the 10% rule for sustainability.
This is a proposal for governments to set aside 10% of their land and budget strictly for nature conservation.
How does that tie into the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework from COP15?
That framework set the 30 by 30 target protecting 30% of the planet by 2030. India currently has about 24% forest cover, but our strict protected area network is only 903 areas, covering 5.1%.
So we have a long way to go. But it's not just about saving trees, it's about ecosystem services.
The Descupta Review valued nature services at $125 to $140 trillion a year. Conservation is an economic necessity.
It's incredible how we protect the Earth, but at the same time, we're reaching for the stars. Let's hit India's Space Odyssey milestones.
The PIB backgrounder on this is thrilling. 12 years of massive achievements.
Chandrayaan-3 landing near the South Pole, and Pragyan confirming sulfur, Aditya L1 studying the sun, and Gaganyaan, our crewed mission, coming in late 2026.
But it's not just science anymore, it's commercial. InSpace is supporting over 75 startups like Skyroot and Agdical.
And NSIL has over $800 million in launch contracts. The target is a $44 billion space economy by 2033. It's massive.
The ambition is just staggering.
Speaking of ambition, our last deep dive topic is the Ashtalakshmi framework for Northeast India. What exactly is Ashtalakshmi?
It's a branding concept by the government, calling the 8 Northeast states the 8 forms of goddess Lakshmi, basically framing them as pillars of national growth instead of isolated regions.
And the infrastructure backing this up is huge. 2.5 lakh kilometers of roads, the 4.94-kilometer Bogibeel Bridge, the Subansiri Lower Hydroelectric Project, which is 2,000 megawatts.
Plus Udan airport connectivity. It completely ties into India's Act East policy.
Right, connecting through the Mora land trade route to Southeast Asia, it totally revitalizes Article 371 regions.
It's a complete geopolitical shift.
Okay, we've covered incredible ground. Let's synthesize this for the listeners with our rapid-fire prelims in focus. Can you hit the absolute key takeaways?
Sure. Bergenstock represents Swiss neutrality in U.S.-Iran talks. The India-EU CEPA is targeting dictum at 2026. For the Western Ghats, remember Gadgil wanted 100% ESA, Kastur-Urangan wanted 37%.
Got it.
Biochar relies on pyrolysis, which is low oxygen heating, and the Kunming-Montreal Agreement established the 30 by 30 biodiversity target.
Perfect. Let's finish with our mapping rapid fire. I'll name the place, you give the context. Bergenstock.
Switzerland, hosting the nuclear talks, leveraging their historical neutrality.
Why not?
Kerala, the tragic landslides that catalyzed the 6th ESA draft for the Western Ghats.
Rocky Garhi.
Haryana, the massive Indus Valley site giving us ADNA and facial reconstructions.
Jaitapur.
Maharashtra, the stalled nuclear site affected by the 2010 Civil Liability Act. Manipur, the vital land port for our Act East policy.
Bogibeel.
Assam, the massive railroad bridge boosting connectivity. Gujarat, the site of our major LNG terminal, crucial for energy security.
And finally, Subansiri.
Arunachal Pradesh, the site of the massive new hydroelectric project.
We really did map out the whole world today.
We did. You know, looking at all of this, today we've covered the mapping of ancient DNA, the mapping of the cosmos, and the literal geographic mapping of our physical borders. But it leaves me with one final thought. As we build these immense technological guardrails for AI and these strict legal frameworks for DNA profiling, are we putting that same amount of innovation into the most essential guardrail of all our constitutional fraternity?
That is a brilliant question to ponder. You really have to wonder if we're neglecting the human element while obsessing over the technical.
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank you, the listener, for sticking with us through this massive, knowledge-dense journey. It was a lot to process, but understanding these connections is so vital. Keep questioning the world around you, and we'll catch you next time. This concludes today's deep dive.